Hello learners, welcome to this session on your course BFDI 072 Basics of Pattern Making and Sieving. Today we will be discussing on the topic Tools for Pattern Making. This is the second unit of your course. So today in this session we will discuss about the fashion terminologies and the tools for pattern making and sieving, which is very important to know as a student of fashion design. So first let us talk what is the objective behind this particular unit and what all information you will get after learning this unit. So after going through this unit, you will be able to acquaint yourself with the tools which are required to study this particular course, Basics of Pattern Making and Sieving. And it will also help you to identify the fabric terms related to pattern cutting and organize yourself the uses of basic terms and principles for the future units which are included in this particular course, Basics of Pattern Making and Sieving. So terminologies used in pattern making, it is very important for you to understand and be well versed with the terminologies, because as being a student of fashion design and to become a professional, you should know what terms are there which are related to pattern making, cutting and sieving. So this unit will help you to learn about the terminologies and understand what that term means and the uses of that particular term. So you must have studied about some of these terms which we will discuss in this particular session, and you might be aware with it and its uses and its application. So these terms which we'll discuss in this session are very useful for starting this course and further laying and cutting of the pattern on the fabric. So first we will discuss what are different terms which is related to pattern making and the cutting. First term you will hear and you should know is the pattern making. So pattern making, as your first unit is also based on the different methods of pattern making. So pattern making means a system of making pattern or the blocks using the body measurement. Like if you go for the garment construction, the first step we do is we take the body measurement and after that we create the pattern. So that process is said as the pattern making, which is developed, or the basic blocks we develop by taking the body measurement. So it can be done either by two-dimensional method that we discussed, it is drafting, or by the means of flat pattern making, or of draping, which is the three-dimensional method, which on which we directly drape the fabric on the dress form to create a design. So this is what the pattern making means. Second terminologies which we use is the drafting or the flat pattern making. So it is a system of making blocks by using the body measurement on a paper. First we develop the basic block or the basic pattern, we say, which is done by using the standard body measurement, or we can use the measurement of a particular person. So the flat pattern making is a two-dimensional method we use, because it is directly body measurement is transferred on the paper and after that it is converted into the garment. So it makes use of well-termed basic sloper. So these there are front bodies, back bodies, we have the sleeve, front, skirt and the back. So as we discussed, we have for the every body part in the garment, for the front part, for the back part, we develop different patterns and then it is used for cutting purpose. So the patterns when traced onto the fabric and then cut, and then it is led to be stitched as a garment. So the third terminologies which we use is the draping. Draping is a three-dimensional method, because as in the early we discussed, drafting and the flat pattern making, those two were the two-dimensional method, but draping method, we say it as a three-dimensional method because in this proper method, we use the fabric directly on the dress form to create the design. And draping proceeds from flat sketch to draping the fabric directly on the dress form. We have the sketch in front of us and we have the fabric. We directly go for the draping of the particular design what we have. Then one term we use is the muslin. Muslin you will get to hear in every step when we follow the pattern making process up to the garment designing. So muslin, it is a starched or untreated cotton fabric which we use to develop the pattern. So it is a plain weave fabric available in different weight. It is low cost and is used for making test fit and also used for the draping purpose. So the test fit garment or the sample garment what we developed are commonly known as the toile, which is very important step in the garment construction to validate the fit of the garment. We use this particular muslin cloth to prepare the test fit garment. So as we discussed, it is of various weight. So lightweight muslin fabric we generally use for the soft drapes. Like if the sketch or the design what we have, it is very flowy. For that creating that design, we use the lightweight muslin. Then we have the medium weight muslin that is used for draping and testing the basic patterns. And the heavyweight muslin, we use it for testing tailored garment like suits or the jacket. That for that purpose we use the heavyweight muslin. Then another term we use in the fashion designing or the pattern making term is the selvage. Selvage is very important to understand. It is in the common term we say it as the edge of the fabric, but in technical term we say it as the selvage. So selvage is the narrow or the firmly woven strip on the lengthwise grain edge of the woven fabric. Like when you see a fabric which on the whole, you see a dark edge on the dark line or a strip on the edge of the fabric which is in the lengthwise of the fabric. So that particular thing or that particular strip is known as the selvage or edge of the fabric. So it can be seen very easily on both the lengthwise edges of the fabric and it is said as the selvage. So next term which we use is the grain. Grain is very important to understand so that you can understand the structure of fabric very easily. So grain, it states the direction in which the yarn is woven or knitted. Like when we have the fabric, when you see it minutely, it is the interlacing of two yarns. So direction of the yarn is termed as the grain line or the grain. So basically we have the three types of grain in any fabric. We have the lengthwise grain which is said as the warp yarn. We have the crosswise grain which is said as the weft and also the bias grain. So let us talk in detail. So lengthwise grain or the warp yarn which is parallel to the selvage. Like when we have the selvage, we have the fabric. When you see the edge of the fabric which is lengthwise, the yarn which is parallel to the selvage, it is known as the warp yarn or the lengthwise grain. And the direction is known as the lengthwise grain. So the most of the garments which we cut we do in the lengthwise grain or in the warp yarn. Next type of grain is the crosswise grain or weft yarns. So weft yarns are the perpendicular to the selvage. Like the warp yarns are the parallel to the selvage. The weft yarn are perpendicular to the selvage and known as the weft yarn, and the direction is known as the crosswise grain. So the garment which is cut in this direction will have more stretch and less strength as compared to the garment which is cut in the warp yarn direction. So this is the basic difference between the lengthwise grain and the crosswise grain. Then the third type of grain we have in the fabric is the bias grain. So bias grain represents a slanting or the diagonal line across the weave of the cloth. So when you see a fabric which is square in piece, when you see the diagonal direction or the draw or cut the fabric in the diagonal line, it is said as the bias grain. So a true bias, when we cut the true bias or have the true bias on the fabric, the angular line that intersects with the lengthwise and the crosswise grain, it is at the 45 degree of angle on the fabric. Then we have the true bias grain on the particular piece of fabric. So you can understand with this picture that you can see a picture in that there is a fabric with a strips, and it is exampled with all the three grain lines which we discussed. First the lengthwise grain line, crosswise grain line and the bias grain. So the stripped fabric which you can see in the picture, where a basic bodice is placed in three directions. The first body which indicates that the body is being cut on the straight grain, that is center front line parallel to the selvage. So you can now understand by seeing the picture. In the second bodies, which is in the middle, is placed in a way that the center front line of the bodies is perpendicular to the selvage, and this will result in the bodies cut on a cross grain. And in the third picture you can see the bodies at the center front line is placed at an angle of 45 degree to the selvage. So this will result a bodies to be cut on a bias grain. So this is, now you can understand how you will place the different layout, or you can do the layout of a different bodies according to the length or according to the grains of the different grain we learnt about on the piece of fabric and how it will look like. So when we transfer this bodies on a human figure or a dress form, in the first picture you can see the first bodies that is cut on a straight grain line. It has a good strength. When we cut the fabric for any garment construction in a lengthwise grain, it gives us good strength to the garment. The garment which is stitched in that direction, it has good strength and it is very durable. And in the second picture, the second bodies that is cut on a cross grain will have lesser strength, less in strength, will have some amount of stretchability in the garment and will wear off easily with time because it has less strength as compared to the lengthwise grain. It is very it will wear off very easily with the usage or with the passes of time. But in the third bodies, what you see, the third picture will have least strength. Like the first, which is cut in the lengthwise, it will have good strength. Which is cut in crosswise, it will have lesser strength than the lengthwise. But the fabric which is cut in the bias grain will have the least strength and maximum stretchability. It will, the fabric or the garment which is cut in the bias grain and it is made with that type of fabric grain, it will have maximum stretchability in that particular garment. This means it can wear off very easily. So you can understand, if we cut the fabric in a diagonal direction or a 45 degree of angle and it is very stretchable, it will be not that much comfortable for any design, every type of design, and it will wear off very easily. So the garment cut on the bias grain especially, it also distorts quickly, and in other words we can say that will sag or lose the shape of the garment from wherever they stretches. So from where if the wearer it is stretched from that particular shape, it will lose its shape. So however, the garment which is cut on a bias can be used for creating interesting patterns and the designs also. So generally bias pattern or the bias cut we use for the fastening or finishing of the garment. So this is the explanation for the different grains and its uses and its application on the garment. Then these were basic terminologies related to the pattern making. So after that, some tools are there which is very important for you to understand, which are used for pattern making and sewing techniques. So as all of you must be aware and familiar that to stitch a garment you need a sewing machine, because when we are talking about the garment construction and stitching, first thing comes in mind the sewing machine. But apart from the sewing machine, what all tools are there, what other tools we need to cut and stitch the fabric, we will understand. Similarly, for making pattern of a garment, which from the first thing we are talking to develop a pattern, for making a pattern of a garment, what all tools we need to create and some additional tools which we need both for pattern making and the stitching purpose. So pattern making and sewing technique both involves the making of a pattern, cutting it into the fabric and stitching of the garment. So these basic 3 steps we follow. First is the pattern making, then cutting of the fabric and stitching of the garment. So the entire process involves the use of various tools. Let us see what tools we use for the pattern making. First and the basic thing, important tool we use is the pencil. As we know, mechanical lead pencil or any type of pencil we use are preferred for making clean, sharp line on a paper. So first tool we use is the pencil. Second we use is the fabric marking pencils and pen. So apart from for the drawing on the paper, we need a pencil or the pen which are used on the fabric. So these are a special types of pencil or pen which are used for marking on the fabric, and the marks which are made or which are made on the piece of fabric washes away when it is washed or it goes for the laundry. Then third tool we use is the tailor's chalk. Tailor's chalk is very important and it is used for marking on the clothes. It comes in a pack with different colors, blue, yellow, white. So as to match with the color of your fabric, you can use this particular tailor's chalk according to the fabric. So the light color chalk should be used for the light colored fabric. Chalk marks disappears easily after it is washed. Then we need a eraser. Any good quality eraser is used. You can use. Then we use the rulers. Rulers are very important to make straight lines on the pattern, and you would need various types of ruler because in the pattern making process. The ruler should contain measurement in inches as well as in the centimeters. So in the pattern making, we need the longest ruler you can have, would need to make for the pattern, making the patterns, and that is of the 24 inches. It can be of the plastic or the wooden. And the shortest ruler measurement which we need is of the 6 inches. So you can have the both rulers of the both measurement. Then we need the pattern master. Pattern master, it is a measuring tool with one side straight and other side curve. So this is a multi-purpose tool to draw straight line also and perpendicular line also, armhole curves and the side seam curves. So this is a multi-purpose tool which we use for the pattern making. Then we have a L square. L square, if you see in the picture, it is a wooden plastic ruler with one side longer than the other, and in this shape of L, the shape of this ruler or the scale is the shape of L alphabet in the English. So it is used to draw lines which are at 90° to each other and for marking grain lines on a finished pattern. So this all tools makes the marking on the pattern very comfortable and easy. Then we have the hip curve. Hip curve, it is a plastic or a wooden or it can be of metal curve ruler that has a curve similar to the side seam of the body. So when we develop a pattern and we want to mark the lines on the curved part of the bodies, like we want to make a line on the curvy part of the body, we use the hip curves because it have curves on the ruler. It is used for making curves line on the pattern of the skirt, pant. We generally use the hip curves, and it can also be used for making curved hem lines, like from the circular part we can use this particular type of ruler. Then we have the leg curve. Leg curve, it is a plastic or a wooden or it can be also of metal curve ruler that has curve similar to the side seam of the body as we have in the hip curves, and it is used for making the curve lines on the pattern, skirt or pant, and shallower curves on the compared to the hip curves. Like the basic difference between hip curve and the leg curve, that leg curve can be used for the shallower curves of the pattern or the pattern which we are going to develop. Then we have the French curves. This is the most used tool in the pattern making process. So it is a plastic curve scale used for making the curves of the armhole and the neckline in a pattern. Then we have the measuring tape, which is very important because pattern making start with taking the body measurement. We need a very good quality measuring tape. So you all must be familiar with this particular tool, and it should be narrow and flexible. Not that much flexible, it should not be stretchable. It has inches measurement on one side and centimeters on the others. Then we have the style tape. It is used as a narrow woven tape to mark the style lines or the landmarks on the dress form. Then we have the dress forms. Dress form, it is a body form made up of a specific measurement, or we can say of a standard measurements. They are made in different materials from metal to canvas or to paper, and dress form normally comes with a collapsible shoulders, detachable arms and the legs. So these dress form we generally use for the draping purpose, or when we develop a test fit garment, we use that dress form to validate the garment and to display purpose also. The dress form are very important to check the fit and proportion of the garment what we have created. Then we have the tracing wheel. So it is important wheel which is pointed wheel with a handle. So that staggers edges of a small wheel is used for tracing the lines and notches for a pattern to the fabric. So in the picture you can see the tool with a red handle. It is known as the tracing wheel, like the pattern what we have developed on a piece of paper, and then we want to convert that transfer that particular pattern on fabric. We use this particular tool, tracing wheel, to trace the pattern on the fabric. Then we have the notches. Notcher, it is a hand tool which we use in the pattern making, which works like a punching machine. So in this picture you can see below the tracing wheel, the tool is said as the notcher. So it is like a punching machine we have for the papers. It is used to give a small cut or a nick in the outline of the pattern paper. So this cut is called as the notch. So if you have difficulty in searching the tools, you can have a small scissors instead of this notcher. Then we have the pattern paper cutter. We need the paper cutting scissor. We need the fabric cutting scissor. So as a designer, we should have the separate scissors for cutting the paper and for cutting the fabric. So fabric cutting scissor, it is a cutting instrument that is 9-10 inches in length. The scissor should be sharp and of a good brand, preferably with the brass handle. One of the cutting the which we use for the fabric. So you should have one small scissor that is used for the clipping and notching of the fabric, and separate for cutting of the fabric. Then we have the pinking shears. So this is a special type of scissor we use in the pattern making. So pinking shears, these are used to cut zigzag edges as blades are shaped in the form of zigzag teeth. So in the picture you can see this is how the pinking shears looks like. And as it has zigzag teeth, or it cuts the fabric in that particular shape. So these are useful for finishing the seams and samples, as it minimizes the fraying or destroying the edges of the fabric. So hand sieving needles we use in the pattern making. Machine needles we use apart from the sieving hand needles. We use that hand needles for finishing of the hemlines and joining of the fabric before going for the final machine stitch. Then we have the machine needle separately. So special needles are required for sieving machine. These needles can be thick or thin, which depends totally on the type of fabric we are going to use for stitching. Then we have the bobbin and the bobbin case. Bobbin case carries the under thread to be fixed in the machine shuttle. Bobbin is the metallic spool which holds the thread and is fixed in the bobbin case. So it helps the thread to hold in the bobbin case. Threads from the bobbin interlocks with the upper thread of the machine to form a stitch. Then we have the thread we use, it should be of a good quality and according to the fabric we are stitching. We have the seam ripper to remove the seam or to unhold the silk. We have the seam ripper. It is used for ripping seam we have which have not come out perfect, so we use the seam ripper for that purpose. Sewing machine, definitely for a construction of a garment we need different types of sewing machine are available. We will discuss in detail in the next unit. We have the pressing equipments. So there are different types of pressing equipments we use for the pattern making. There are two types. First is the steam iron or the dry iron we use. Pressing plays a very important role in the production of a perfectly finished garment, because if we are going to develop a good fit garment, to remove all the wrinkles from the fabric, it is very important to use the pressing process. So it is required at almost every step of the garment construction and should be done with great care. Then lastly, we have the pattern making paper on which we develop the basic blocks or the sloper. You would need a paper of two kinds. You can have the heavyweight and the medium weight paper. The first one is used, we usually have the brownish or the beige in color paper and is used for making the basic sloper. Then we have the heavyweight paper, that the second one is the softer, like with the white chart paper we use for the second purpose. Carbon paper. So carbon paper, which is coated on one side with wax or chalk, it is used for transferring paper lines into muslin, the fabric, to transfer the pattern on the test fit garment. So yellow colored carbon paper is preferred for the pattern making purpose, and black color might leave stains on the garment, so we don't use that particular carbon paper in the garment construction. Muslin. Muslin is an untreated cotton fabric used for making test fit and the first sample while we are working to develop a pattern, and it is off-white in color and available in various weight. So these were some terminal tools which we need for the pattern development and in the pattern making process. So in this session we discussed about different terminologies which is related to pattern making and the sewing technology, which you should know. We discussed about different tools for the pattern making and the stitching. Hope this session will be beneficial for you. Thank you.